The Winston-Salem Transit Authority is one of the most respected and efficient transportation systems in the country. It's a system that takes over 10,000 people to and from work every day. A business that has over 35 routes and grosses more than $1.4 million per year. It's hard to believe that one of the first Winston-Salem Transit Authority buses looked like this. In the early 1900s, they were called jitneys. Jitney was a slang term for a nickel, which is what it cost to ride. Many of the early jitney drivers used their own vehicles to offer a much-needed source of transportation to the black community. The Morgan brothers were no exception. Ralph Morgan saw jitney services operating while he served in the Army during World War I.
Uncle Ralph came back and he actually said that he saw troops being transported from one area to another in what they called jitneys. And of course, he conceived the idea of doing the same thing when he came back from overseas.
He returned home and was determined to start his own company. He joined forces with his brother Harvey, and they began running their own jitney service.
I remember that it was their life. They were really interested in transporting blacks to the factories, and they had no way to get there except to walk. There was no cab company or most of them didn't own automobiles.
By 1926, there were 35 jitney buses in operation. There were no rules or set routes, so the early buses drove haphazardly throughout the black community, picking up passengers wherever they found them. The Morgan brothers, along with 19 other bus owners, including Elijah and Joe Miller, J.H. Hairston, C.T. Woodland, Charlie Peebles, George Dillahunt Sr., John Adams, George Ragsdale, and Edward Davis met April 21, 1926, determined to organize the new industry. Out of this meeting, the Safe Bus Company was formed. Harvey Morgan was the company's first president. It operated, making money and providing jobs for the black community for 42 years. It also laid the foundation for what is now the Winston-Salem Transit Authority. Black leaders that were instrumental in the success of Safe Bus over the years include John Adams, Buster Green, and Hampton Haith. With foresight and determination, those early jitney drivers saw a need in the community and, overcoming many obstacles, found a way to meet it. They were not alone. Many African Americans had that same entrepreneurial spirit and started their own companies. The city of Winston-Salem owes a huge debt to those early African American businessmen and women. Between 1870 and 1900, the towns of Winston and Salem experienced phenomenal growth. The population of Winston grew from 473 in 1870 to 2,854 by 1880, and then almost quadrupled by 1890. The expansion was due in part to the completion of the Northwest North Carolina Railroad extension from Roanoke and the success of the tobacco industry. When Winston and Salem merged in 1913, the area continued to thrive, and by 1920, it was the largest city in North Carolina. Many African Americans came to the city to work in the tobacco factories.
My parents were encouraged to come to Winston-Salem by my aunt, Ella. I had an aunt named Ella. And we came here on the recommendation of her. My father and my mother were farmers, and she had come here from Asheville, North Carolina, and she was working in the tobacco factories at that particular time. And that encouraged my parents to leave the farm and come to Winston-Salem to get a job in the factory.
As the black community grew, its need for services grew as well. The fact that many of these services were not provided by the white community led to even more employment opportunities. Winston-Salem developed a reputation for being a place where both blacks and whites could prosper. It was during this time of growth that many black businesses were born. Many blacks who came to Winston-Salem were employed by R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company, lived near the factories, and started their businesses in the same area. A successful black business district developed in the area between Church and Chestnut Streets and 3rd and 4th Streets.
You had theater, you had grocery stores, you had churches. It was just a center in that area for black people.
One RJR employee who started his own business was William Samuel Scales. He saw a need for an eating establishment that would serve the black factory workers, since most white restaurants would not, and opened a cafe on the corner of 3rd and Church Streets. He served mostly fresh vegetables acquired from his garden. His business became so successful that he was able to leave his factory job to run it full-time.
One of the things he enjoyed most was his restaurant. It was right there across from R.J. Reynolds Tobacco Company. And people just flowed in there at lunchtime, and you could get a wonderful meal for about 20 cents. A plate of greens with a big slice of fat back and a big piece of cornbread. And everything was so good, the pies and everything. And he was famous for the soup that he sold in there. And for everybody called for the soup, and the soup would start getting low, he would yell back, "Bring up the soup." That meant add a little water to it, you know.
Scales' accomplishment did not end with the success of his cafe. He later became a realtor, the first black bail bondsman, a grocer, a partner in the Howard Robinson Funeral Home, and the owner of the Lincoln, the Lafayette, and the Rex Theaters.
And on Saturday mornings, where they showed Cyril's cowboy pictures. And of course, you went there to see them every Saturday. Kids were all there. I think the fee was about a nickel to get in. And
they had vaudevilles that would come in, special shows, you know. Yeah. I guess they would be called something else now, but that would be the stage shows. They called them vaudevilles at that time.
Scales was also elected president of the Forsyth Savings and Trust Company in 1923, which was Winston-Salem's largest black bank. Other cafes were opened downtown, and by 1890, there were 10 black eating establishments. That number peaked in 1915, when there were 35 cafes in operation. Grocery stores were also popular businesses to own in the black community. Many that opened were mom-and-pop operations, small family-run stores. However, some shops were able to expand and offer employment to others. At one time, there were more than 100 black grocers in Winston-Salem. That number was diminished by the Depression and by the increasing popularity of supermarkets. One successful grocer was Low C. Kearns, who came to Winston-Salem in the early 1900s. He opened several grocery stores as well as a cafe. He was a leader in organizing the CMA, Colored Merchants Association stores, in the 1920s. This association helped black store owners offer lower prices through collective buying. Another successful grocer was Thomas L. Hooper Sr.
After graduating from A&T College in 1900, he came to Winston-Salem to work for a friend as a clerk in his grocery store. In 1903, he bought his first grocery store, and that was on East 3rd Street between Patterson and Church Street. There he remained until he left to go to Chicago to work for a few years. Coming back in 1918, he opened his second grocery store at 7th and Patterson Avenue. There he remained until 1962, until urban renewal took the property in the neighborhood.
Charles Branson was one of the earliest blacks to open a grocery store. The building where he operated his store still stands on the corner of 17th and Old Cherry Streets.
When they paved Cherry Street, they bought a lot and built a home over there on Cherry just before you get to the store. The house is still there. And he opened the store shortly after. Now they call them mom and pop stores, but you stopped and whatever you needed, you picked it up, sugar, whatever, and we had a path that used to lead from right there 17th Street. We go down that hill right where Universal Parkway come up there. It used to be a path that led all the way to Boston, over there near the Children's Home. Children's Home's fence ran right behind the black neighborhood there. And people would stop and get whatever. And he ran that store until we had the big bus in 1929. And he had to go out of business.
Black undertakers were among the most financially independent and respected businessmen in the community. Before black citizens went into the undertaking business, white morticians buried the black deceased. Once blacks entered the field, many white funeral homes turned over their black deceased bodies to the black funeral homes. 3 of the most successful funeral homes were Clark Brown and Frederick M. Fitch and Howard Robinson. Clark Brown's business is still open today.
K. Howard, his name was Kerr, K-E-R-R, Howard. And he taught school in the second, it was really the second black school that was set up by the community. And from there, he and Fitch went into a furniture business. It was K. Howard and Fitch Furniture Company. And of course, most furniture makers then made caskets. And in the meantime, Mr. K, that was 1897, founded a funeral home. And Fitch went in other directions and begun a business. Old man K. Howard in developing the business, brought in another cousin of mine, W.S. Scales, who was in the finally bondsman. He operated a restaurant. He had theaters, the Lafayette and the Lincoln theaters, and finally the film business was a little too slow for him. So he sold his equity to Aldine. That's when Bertie and Aldine mortgaged their house for $2,000 and invested in the funeral business. And then it became Howard Robinson. K. Howard died in 1928, and that's when Aldine Robinson became the sole owner. And of course, he developed from that.
These early entrepreneurs paved the way for the successful funeral homeowners of today, including Carl Russell, Thomas Hooper III, and Jerry Gilmore. Black barbers were also financially independent. Some learned the trade as apprentices, while others attended barber school. By 1935, there were more than 25 barber shops operated by blacks. Henry A. Spencer learned the trade by working as a shoeshine boy in a barber shop. He worked a full shift in R.J. Reynolds' Factory No. 8, and then worked as a barber for another 6 to 8 hours in order to support his large family. He retired from Reynolds at age 65, but continued working as a barber until age 81. His customers would walk miles to receive his professional services. Not all black businessmen started in the tobacco factories. One early entrepreneur, George Black, learned the trade of making bricks by hand in a white-owned company, the Hedgecock Brickyard. After mastering the craft, George began making bricks on his own time with an old mud mill he had been given to throw away. His business grew, and he opened a brickyard with Alex Walker. Mr. Black became an instant celebrity when, in the 1970s, he was sent by the United States Agency of International Development to Guyana, South America, to teach the art of brickmaking. Evidence of his pride in his work can be seen all over Winston-Salem. His bricks were used in many banks, Baptist Hospital, and in some of the most beautiful homes in Winston-Salem. Today, his bronze statue stands at the entrance to the Forsyth County Government Center. Other black entrepreneurs prospered in the construction industry. One of the earliest contractors was John H. Smith, Sr.
Pop was worked in a cabinet shop in Madison, and one of Slater Norman Industrial's scouts were out looking for students and came through Madison and talked with Papa and some others about coming up to school. And Papa took him up on it and came. And at that time, they were starting in construction of Lamson Hall. And he worked on that and continued his education there. And he graduated in 1904. And Dr. Simon Green Atkins wanted him to stay and teach the trade. But Papa, that summer, I think it was, had a little contract to build a little house out on Darien Street off of Northwest Boulevard. He built the house, finished it, paid off all his bills, and he told me he had $100 left, clear. And that he told Dr. Atkins that he thought he could make more money in the contracting business.
He also started his own company with John W. Hauser Sr. and was involved in the construction of several buildings on the Winston-Salem State University campus. He later started another construction company with his son, Hugh. John H. Smith & Son was responsible for constructing many beautiful homes in Winston-Salem. Mr. Smith was in the construction business for over 70 years.
One of the things that my grandfather was known for was building a good quality house. He was known for his workmanship, and he was known as being a meticulous worker, and especially with the workers that were trained and work under him, that if they did not do it right, they knew in no uncertain terms that he would make them tear it out and go back and do it right, because we were known, or the construction company was known at that particular time, for quality workmanship.
Another early successful builder was Vivian Ramsour. People asked for him by name because he had a reputation for quality work. He continued to study new methods throughout his career and always strived to improve his craft. Among the most successful business endeavors by blacks was the Winston Mutual Life Insurance Company. The company grew out of the Winston Industrial Association, which was led by Robert W. Brown and consisted of J.W. Jones, J.S. Fitz, W.A. Jones, George W. Hill, J.W. Lewis, John A. Bloom, and J.C. McKnight, among others. The company was established in 1906 to meet the need for sickness and accident insurance among black tobacco workers. Within 3 years, the company had expanded its services to blacks in other cities in North Carolina. In 1915, the company merged with the Mountain City Mutual Company of Asheville and changed its name to Winston Mutual Life Insurance Company. With this merger, the company now issued whole life policies, along with its regular accident and health policies.
There was a shortage of mortgage loans given to black people in Winston-Salem. And the company decided to open a mortgage loan department, which was very successful. We helped many people in Winston-Salem, many black people, to own their own homes. The interest rate was low, 6%, and you know, it was more like a family affair because everybody was working together, and we knew practically everybody who applied for a loan, and it was easy to get a loan with the company. Now, on the heels of that, after about 5 or 6 years, other companies, banks, and the white population saw the need and the profit from it. So things kind of let up, and they were able to get loans at other places. But for years, Winston Mutual was the company.
The insurance company also had district offices in Wilmington, Raleigh, Charlotte, Rocky Mount, Fayetteville, and Greensboro. The company occupied its new offices on East 5th Street in 1969. Even though the company was bought and moved to California in 1985, the Winston Mutual building stands today as an inspiration to black entrepreneurs.
Hard work, and I must say low salaries. They weren't in there for the money really. And having handled the Social Security reports and all that, I have to respect them for what they worked for. Most of them had additional jobs, and they did that on the side until in the 40s, and that's when I guess they were able to pay themselves something. But they were interested in developing a company to leave for the black people in Winston-Salem, Forsyth County, and the adjoining counties.
Forsyth Savings and Trust Company, which became the largest black bank in Winston-Salem, opened its doors in 1907 with $1,000 capital. The company was a full-service institution that offered the same professional services as other banks, including checking, savings, loans, and Christmas Club savings accounts. By 1912, blacks had purchased all of the stock in the bank and received 6% dividends on each of the $10 shares they owned. By 1920, the bank's volume of business had grown to more than $12 million. Forsyth Savings was in operation until the mid-1930s, when it was absorbed by Citizens Bank and Trust Company. Another financial institution, the Victory Credit Union, is the oldest remaining black business in Winston-Salem. It was chartered on April 18, 1946. W.M. Nesby organized the credit union with the help of the clergy and the black business community, and also served as its first secretary-treasurer.
William N. Nesby became a little bit frustrated with the way that the financial situation in the Afro-Americans was being held, and he started the credit union in order to create an atmosphere whereby they could loan and borrow among themselves, and therefore build up the financial situation that's around. That time is very difficult for blacks to get loans at the large institutions, and of course there was always the pawn shops and the loan sharks, and that was expensive for them. It cost them money. So credit union started with the idea that if we pooled our money and loaned to each other and circulated the money among ourselves for a longer period of time, that the blacks' economic condition might improve.
Victory Credit Union provided such services as loans, savings, and Christmas Club savings accounts. Since 1985, the company has been involved in several mergers and name changes. Today, from its offices at 3015 Waughtown Street, it still caters to the black and Latino community. One of the most successful black businesses in Winston-Salem was the Morgan Hoffman Dry Cleaners. At one time, it employed over 50 black citizens in various plants. Its founder, D.L. Morgan, established the Morgan Hoffman Cleaning and Dye Company in 1909. He opened a dry cleaning business in 1914. By the 1930s, he had large plants in the downtown business section and branches in various parts of the city. He even had branches in the white communities. To get around the segregation policy, Mr. Morgan hired white managers to run those branches. His business succeeded due to his constant study of the latest methods of dry cleaning and his use of the most modern equipment available. He promoted the company as Winston-Salem's largest exclusive garment cleaners and dyers. Morgan retired in 1961 after more than 50 years in business. Successful businesses often begin as only dreams. They flourish through hard work and determination. Such is the case with many of the black-owned businesses that prospered in the early 1900s, paving the way for the black entrepreneurs and business leaders of Winston-Salem today.